Good afternoon, Alberto. Can you hear me? Yes. Go ahead, Moises. Thank you very much, everyone. My name is Moises Huerta. Right now, I'm in charge of managing our soybean excellence center, which is something that our U.S. Soybean Export Council has implemented in Latin America from 2021. We're very happy to have you with us today, especially because this is the first webinar that our Soybean Excellence Center has provided for our graduates, those who have finished their courses in poultry, uh, or swine studies or aquaculture. So we welcome the 30 people who are here with us participating, and although also those who will be watching this recording later. So on behalf of USEC, we welcome you. Also, I would like to note the collaboration today that we're doing, not only USEC, but also with the Sorghum Checkoff program, which represents the interests of sorghum producers in the US. And with that, I wanted to thank our colleagues from the Sorghum Checkoff program, Brent Crafton and Shelley Paget, both with that organization, and also the participation of our regional USEC director, Carlos Salinas, and the team from Latin America SEC, Benavides, Alberto Celis, who's our moderator, and Carlos Gonzalez, Claudio Gonzalez, our digital manager for our program, and those speakers who will be with us today, Dr. Mireille Aguayes Ramos and Florentino Lopez, and Dr. Carlos Lopez Cuello. So I'd like to welcome everyone. Thank you for being here with us. And this is a great opportunity to participate in live or with the recording. We'll be sharing a lot of material with you over the next 90 minutes, not only from the presenters, but also those who are here to ask questions. And as you know, we'll be talking about the work that uh, U.S. soybean producers do, and our U.S. soybean industry and the sorghum industry from the U.S. Thank you again for participating. Alberto, please, you can go follow the agenda. Thank you, Moises. Welcome, everyone. As Moises mentioned, my name is Alberto Celis, and I welcome you from the U.S. Soybean Export Council, from the U.S. sorghum checkoff for the sorghum exporters from the U.S. It's a pleasure to have you here. Also, on behalf of the Soybean Excellence Council here in the Americas, and we're going to have a seminar that we're holding jointly with the Sorghum Checkoff program this afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome, as Moises said, Mr. Florentino Lopez, who currently serves as an independent agricultural consultant, and his company is Creando Mañana Agricultural Consulting. This consulting companies helps companies and individuals who look for a new perspective and who want to have revolutionary focus on changing their feed program. Florentino helps to promote sorghum on a domestic and international level through facilitating direct sales and relationships between companies and exchange of technical information. Florentino has been supporting companies and strategies in the ag supply chain. Before he did this, Florentino Lopez was the executive director of the United Sorghum Checkoff Program. This program is sponsored by farmers who want to improve sorghum through research, development, and education and orientation on a domestic and international level. We also have with us Dr. Mireille Argüelles Ramos. She obtained a Bachelor of Science and Master of Science in Animal Industry at the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez, and she has a PhD in Animal and Poultry Science and Physiology from the North Carolina State University. She is a non-ruminant nutritionist with 14 years of experience formulating commercial and experimental premixes and finished feeds for poultry. Dr. Argüelles Ramos served as an assistant professor in the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez, and also ADM and Novus International. And she worked as a technical manager for animal nutrition companies. And there at the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez, she taught undergraduate and graduate courses. In 2018, she joined the Animal Sciences Department, where she teaches at Clemson and for bachelor's and master's. And her program evaluates alternative programs, including alternative ingredients, including sorghum. And finally, we have also with us Dr. Carlos Lopez Cuello. Dr. Lopez Cuello is a veterinarian with 5 decades of experience focused on research, technical development, instruction, and human resource development at UNAM, the university in Mexico City, the Autonomous University in Mexico City. And he has worked with many different companies in Latin America and consulting, and he has helped the industry to update their vision for soybean meal usage, especially for poultry and eggs, and taking into account cultural issues and sustainability. Currently, Dr. Lopez Cuello is the leader of the poultry track for the Soybean Excellence Center in Latin America. It's a pleasure to have them with us. And to begin our seminar, I would ask Florentino if he could turn his camera on and begin his first presentation for this seminar. Florentino? Thank you, Alberto. It's great to have the opportunity to be with you this evening. I hope that the information that I'm going to present to you will help you to understand more regarding not only the sorghum program, but a little also about sorghum, and also Dr. Argüelles is going to tell us more about using sorghum and soy hand in hand. So to begin, one of the things I want to talk the most about is our US soy program, and also about our US sorghum industry and the world sorghum industry. That information is a background to give you more information, not only what's going on in the US, but also in the world regarding sorghum. The Sorghum Checkoff program, as Alberto mentioned, it's a producer-funded organization, and there are about 20 different programs under this uh, association that are dedicated to this program. And the U.S. sorghum industry organized this program, and it's overseen by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and by the producer board, and they have more input on how the funds or the programs are going to be organized. But like Alberto was mentioning, but also regarding research, promotion, and education of those programs. When we're talking about research, we're talking about not only what's going on in the field, but we also have programs that can help on a basic level that can help to increase sorghum yield per acre. And it can also help with extensive long-term research for improving sorghum for nutrition. And for promotion, also we're also always looking for different markets and ways that we can help people from other countries and also people here in the US to use sorghum in different ways. Maybe many people don't recognize the value of sorghum, and this is why we're always trying to take that information and that education in this manner to people who will be able to understand sorghum usage. And that education that we're doing is not only for sorghum, but also the sorghum products and byproducts, or to where sorghum is used as an ingredient. If we look at the sorghum industry, one thing that we can recognize is that it's really important in sorghum is that sorghum is non-GMO. We're not saying that sorghum is different from other crops, or we're just mentioning that this that we're in disagreement with GMOs, but we're just saying that at this point, sorghum has not had any transgenic changes that are in the market. There is some research that's been done regarding sorghum, but there's no GMO sorghum on the market. Tannins is also something that we hear a lot about, and we have a lot of information for you regarding that. And in the Americas, we don't see that. In the US, we don't see that. This is something that we're seeing in tests, and you can see in the Grains Council, they always do a test every year to analyze the tannin level, but also the nutrition level of sorghum. And this is something that you can find in the literature from the US Grains Council. It's a traditional ingredient, and we can talk about that a little bit more. The areas where sorghum is produced, you can see that in the Midwest, and the center of the country is where sorghum is produced. And really, sorghum is something that we see a lot in dry areas and areas where there's drought, and in areas where there's dry land farming. And we can see production in those areas. In that central or Midwest area, you can see that this is only with non-irrigated acres, and rain feeds the sorghum crop, and then the uh, then they harvest it in the same manner.
Most sorghum is exported. 60 to 70% of US sorghum is exported throughout the world. One of the largest areas is knowing it's used in so many different ways. It is used for ethanol production. It is being used not only with pork production, but also for other types of livestock. You can also see that pet food is always increasing its usage of sorghum for pets. Likewise, human consumption is always growing as well. Most sorghum currently is exported, and it's mostly exported to China. So the amounts of sorghum, the quantities that we're talking about in US dollars is 10 million tons. Is the current production is about 10 million tons. Every year, it we'll see ups and downs based on rainfall, based on drought, and based on the amount that is able to be harvested at the time. So on the next slide, one of the big areas here that we're seeing as we're talking about is exports. Near 70% of the production currently, or within the past 5 years, has been exported, or yes, is exported. So that's a really big amount. We know that number is going to continue to increase. And so currently, most of that is going to China. Almost everything that is produced is being exported directly to China. There are other countries that are using sorghum, and that's an area that we can see also in the worldwide information and literature. If we take a look at the export terminals, most of the sorghum is going to leave through Texas, either out of Houston, Corpus Christi, and another place that it can come out over rail would be to Mexico. But most of it is going to be shipped out of Houston or Corpus Christi. There are some other locations or other terminals that can also move sorghum as well. But again, the majority of it is coming directly through Texas. And mostly it's because of how close it is to the production zones as far as having an export terminal there in Texas. On the worldwide front, you can see that the US produces close to 14% of all of the worldwide sorghum production. Other countries that also produce sorghum, we see Nigeria. That's another country. They produce close to 11%. However, they are not involved in sorghum exports. Likewise, Mexico. Although Mexico is producing 7.5%, most of that is used domestically. The majority of other countries that are selling or growing sorghum or have available sorghum would be the US, Argentina, and Australia. These are the main countries involved in sorghum exports. And so very soon we'll be able to see that the amount of potential exports is biggest in the United States. So the worldwide production, if we're talking about worldwide production, near 70 million tons are produced worldwide. We're also seeing that about 10 million tons are going to be exported to different countries. And one is the amount. We can see also the speed. So most exports are coming out of the United States. There are some other countries. However, currently, the US is exporting the most amount of sorghum out of all of the other sorghum exporting countries. We can see this here in this graph. The US represents near 77% of worldwide exports over the past 5 years. So once again, it's really important to know this, that the amount of sorghum that is produced in the US, American sorghum, is very available for domestic and international markets. This amount is going to continue to increase, and we expect to have more sorghum available. Likewise, we're expecting to have more ways in which sorghum can be utilized as well. So once again, the sorghum program is always looking for ways to improve the use of sorghum, not only in these specific livestock farming sectors, but also for human usage, for pets, and in other areas. We're always looking for different ways in which sorghum can be used. So once again, one of the big areas, as far as my comment here, and I know that Dr. Arguelles is going to talk more about poultry, but one of the big areas is knowing that sorghum from the US, the amount and the presence of tannins is really, really low. So likewise, the availability of energy and protein is high. So once again, you can find a lot of information from the US Grains Council. And you'll also notice it's not only the information about tannins, but also the information about protein and energy. So I know that you're going to get more information directly from Dr. Arguelles about sorghum and the uses of sorghum, and also regarding the use of soy for broiler chickens and also for layers. So all of this information, we want to share all of this different information. This can also be presented. You can also find it yourself in these links. Most of them would be throughout the page sorghumcheckoff.com, where you can find additional information quite specifically about different areas of sorghum use, not just about production, but also about the different usages for sorghum within each one of these sectors. So currently, Alberto, I'm going to give you the floor. Thank you, Florentino. This has been very important information, very interesting. Florentino, if you can stop sharing your screen, please. And I will take advantage of this moment now to let you all know. You can make your questions directly in the chat. So if you would like to write down your questions in the chat, then at the end of the following presentation, I'm going to read through these questions to whoever these questions are directed to. I'll read them to them. So for all of us, it's important to note that this webinar, we have it available in 2 languages. We have it available in English and in Spanish. So to be able to switch from one language to another, there's an icon at the lower part of your screen within the platform. And if you have your system in Spanish, you'll see the labels in Spanish and it'll say interpretation. You'll see kind of a globe icon. And if you click on it, and then you can select the language that you would like to listen to. If you can give me just a moment, I'm going to switch over to say that in English for those who speak English who may not be on the English channel yet. Okay, I'm going to go back to Spanish now. Okay. So as I was mentioning, one of the ways that you can ask your questions would be, thank you, Florentino. Thank you so much. It would be in the chat. You can write in your questions. I see that we have a few comments or that are coming in. We'll be able to read those through at the end and share those questions with our speakers. And then the other way you can also add a question is if you'd like to make a comment, you can also ask it verbally out loud. You can actually raise your hand. We have a button that says reactions or react, where you can use the icon to raise your hand or use the option to raise your hand digitally. And that way you can show in Zoom that you're raising your hand and you can ask to be allowed to speak and ask your question verbally. Okay, so thank you so much, Florentino, for your presentation regarding the global market about sorghum. So now we're going to welcome Dr. Mireya Argüelles for her to give her presentation. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask everyone if they can see the presentation, they can see the slides. Does it all look good? Yes, yes, everything looks great. Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon or good evening to everyone, wherever you are. It's a pleasure for me to be here to talk a little bit about the work that we've done at Clemson University. But first of all, I'm going to talk about sorghum because I want to make sure that I keep within my time limit that I was assigned. And so here we have the slides. This is our agenda. We're going to be talking a little bit first about US sorghum and tannins. I know that Florentino already talked a little bit about that, but we're going to go into a little more detail. We're going to be talking about complementary nutritional composition between sorghum and soybeans, the anti-nutrient content for poultry diet, and how we can deal with those with some products on the market and some good formulation practices for sorghum and soybean meal. And also we're going to be talking about grain processing and diets when we use these two ingredients. And then we're going to speak quickly about research with broilers and layers that we're doing right now at Clemson. So first of all, we know sorghum, and you might know sorghum by color, and maybe you might hear me comparing it to corn. Besides, aside from the fact that they're uh, two different products or two different crops, they are really interrelated taxonomically and genetically. And we see sorghum from Africa and corn from the Americas, but they're closely related. So we're going to be talking about important facts. The first important fact I put these in yellow because this is something that I want you to take home. And so, like Florentino said, U.S. sorghum is completely free of tannins, and so the varieties or the hybrids that are used in the U.S. are tannin free, and so they're very appropriate for poultry diets. And so this isn't a concern for a formulator, for a nutritionist to have to deal with high tannins. Those of you who know about tannins know that they can affect the digestibility of certain ingredients in the digestive tract. And so you might have issues with growth, appropriate growth. And so you don't have to be concerned with that. So with US sorghum, you don't have that problem and that concern. So we always do research and on different samples, and we do our analysis of that feed. And this is just one of the examples of one of the analysis that can be done. And this is Dr. Hagerman, and she's a chemist at Miami University. And if you see that uh, the sorghum that if we were to have tannins in the sorghum that we were testing, they would be high, like the purple line. And so this is the tannin control line, and the purple one is, and you can see that we didn't have detectable tannin levels in the sorghum that we analyzed. We used Iowa State University analysis. And I think the highest that we've found in one of our samples was 0.07%, and that's basically nothing. And the lack of tannin or the very little tannin has no effect on animal development. So once again, we don't have to be concerned about tannins when we use US sorghum. So moving on, the next important fact, number two, that I want you to take home, as you can see, the complementary nutritional composition that we've seen between soybean meal, US soybean meal and US sorghum. I'm sure that you've seen this many times in many of your courses, that soybean meal is an excellent amino acid source for poultry diets. And when I'm asked about this, I said, of course, I can discuss this. It's very easy because we're always using US soybean meal for our different research. So you can see in this graph, we can see that we have the crude protein in US soybean meal. It could be between 47 and 49%, depending on the product you receive. And it's an excellent amino acid source. And you can see also the nutritional composition of sorghum, US sorghum. You can see the amount of starch that we will find in US sorghum, which is about 63%. And that is wet based. And you can see here that the only difference is in sorghum, and I'll go to the next slide. You can see that usually sorghum will have a little bit higher crude protein level than corn, and also we'll see obviously a difference in dry matter, and you can see that sorghum is an excellent energy source for animals when compared to corn. And we also see the amino acids that are in both grains, and we can see the composition is quite similar for both. And here we see what would be the digestibility coefficients here for specific animals. And we can see here the amino acid availability that is similar between both sorghum and corn. And so we already know that corn is an excellent source for amino acids, and sorghum is as well. And here, basically what I had mentioned to you, the energy source and for poultry diets, we have the greatest portion for sorghum. It comes from a high starch content, and we can see that it has at 30% of the uh, dietary crude protein. And so there's uh, a lot of protein and amino acids that come from sorghum for formulation. So we need to be aware of the quality and the amino acid availability. This is important for a good formulation for our animals. And so regarding digestibility coefficients, when we're talking about digestibility, we're talking about how much of that nutrient the animal can take advantage of in and that can be absorbed by the animal and the amount that would be excreted. So the higher that coefficient is, much better for us. That means that the animal is taking advantage of a greater portion of the nutrition that it's consuming. And so we see for US sorghum, it's about 88% of the starch that the animal consumes. Usually for other cereals with wheat or corn, it'll be a little higher. And that's why sorghum has a lower glycemic index. And that's why this is something that's very desirable for human diets, because sorghum starch is digested more slowly or incompletely. But when we're talking about farm animals, it's different because they have a shorter life. And so we want a higher digestibility. So we need to go to our next fact, and that is number 3. And for our take-home facts, and that is for any grains, we're going to have certain anti-nutrient factors. And this will be chemical compounds that have that create issues for absorption of nutrients. So here I can mention we have phytate. It's a complex molecule that comes from phosphorus, and poultry have the capacity to be able to take advantage of that phosphorus. And so usually the animal consumes that, and it's comes out in the feces. We see that in corn, in sorghum, in soybeans. It's in all of these grains and oil seeds. And we're very fortunate that even though it affects the digestibility of different minerals and starch and other nutrients, we're lucky that there is a technology to be able to get rid of the phytate issues. And those are phytases. Those are enzymes that have been studied for decades, and there are products available on the market, and there are some prices because of the competition. So it's an issue we have to face, but we do have a solution available to us. Another anti-nutrient that we could face are the caferins. And caferins are the most abundant protein in sorghum. And basically the problem we see is structural, because we have the starch with the sorghum, and that uh, doesn't allow the amino acids to be so available for digestion. We have the advantage of the solution of proteases, and research shows that certain protease products increase the digestibility not only of starch but also of sorghum amino acids. So we have a problem, but we have a solution available on the market, and they're quite accessible and not very costly. And so we can mention uh, the phenolic compounds. And we have that in sorghum. In fact, in soybean meal, we see that in corn as well. But it can cause a few uh, issues with nutrient digestibility, but it can have some positive points for animal health. And so we can have positive and negative effects on animal nutrition. If we have issues with nutrition, we have also health benefits. So we have solutions to deal with those anti-nutrients. Maybe I heard someone with a question. Okay, no, Mire, there's no question right now. We'll have all the questions at the end for our Q&A from the chat. We do have questions, but we'll look at those later. So we'll continue. So we have covered the third fact that's really important. And you'll have access to this recording later. And here's more detailed of what I explained regarding the anti-nutrient effect of phytate and why we need to address that with phytase in the diet to be able to address that.
On the other hand, we do know that sorghum is a very good source of protein. It has a good amount of protein, and obviously it is quite limited as far as the lysine and methionine, because there's a main amino acids, and it does have a good amount of treonina, tryptophan, and valine, and those are the main amino acids that we're dealing with here. From there, we're going to important fact number 4. Good formulation practices for poultry feed. And this applies not only if you're going to be use corn or sorghum or wheat or some sort of a combination of grains, the different alternative ingredients and different byproducts. So for all of these, you need to have good formulation practices. And so in this case, number 1, the first advice and tip I'll give you, if you are a nutritionist, if you're doing formulations, as much as you can, use analyzable values. Take your time. I know it takes money, it takes investment, but it's really important if you really want to have the appropriate performance in the field. That starts with nutrition and the quality of these ingredients in the feed and the balance of those nutrients. So if you have access to a chemist, or perhaps if you have an NIR team, please use them, and please use analyzed values to make your decisions, because you're going to find a lot of variability. There are times between different lots and batches. So it's important to not assume that the value that I have today is going to be the same as the one I get tomorrow. And so you have to always analyze the present nutrients, and also looking at that raw material, because you have to know what adjustments you're going to have to do and what those values are within the formulations. So number 2, make your formulations based on digestible amino acids using a concept of ideal protein. And it's so important to make sure that you're aware and paying attention to, when you're doing your formulations, that not all of the present amino acids within that grain are going to be available for the animal. They might not be utilized by the animal and absorbed. They will end up just within excrement. And so that's why it's so important for you to really know what is the requirement and what is the digestibility of these amino acids within the grains that we're using in the diet, in the formulations. So that's really important. And that way you can reduce the amount of nutrient loss within excrement. So that's a win for everyone. And so it's very important to use those values. Okay, important fact number 5. This has to do with the grain processing. And so in this case, we can replace corn out of the diet or wheat, and we can use sorghum. And it is possible. We have done it. We almost always do that when we work with broilers. We remove corn, and the performance is very comparable. And current is the same with other animals whose diets are based on corn and soy. But we do know there are some factors that do affect the digestibility of these nutrients. And so we also see that it has to do with the grinding and the temperature. And in this case, we're also talking about the humidity, temperature, and pressure that are used in the pelletizing process. So it's very advisable to use pelletizing temperatures as low as possible without compromising the quality of the pellet. So we're talking about broilers specifically. That presentation is very important. So we don't want to, leave things off to the side, but we can go on the smallest range that's possible for us to use for pelletizing, and that's going to be better. We know that if we base it on temperatures, we're talking about between 82 to 90 degrees, we will see a reduction in the digestibility of the nutrients when we include sorghum in the diet or in that formulation, because at that temperature, we're going to have an interaction between the protein within the sorghum grain and starch. So basically, it's going to collapse that structure. And so then later, that's not going to allow that starch that to really open up within the process of digesting. And it's going to obviously affect absorption and digestibility. So it's really important to stay within the right temperature range, keeping it as low as possible. Now, when we talk about the grain size or the particle size, really honestly, based on the literature that I've found, we're more or less between 500 and 1400 microns. So it's all going to depend on the type of sorghum and the type of production. If we have broilers or if we have layers, and the type of production and energy. So more or less we're within that range, but there's not a very specific range. So within that range there, that particle size, we've seen better performance in the animals when they've been fed diet or feed that's based on soy. Okay, so here we have this information is between 500 and 1400, but once again, it depends. So now I'm going to give you a summary, just a quick summary of all the different research that we have been conducting at Clemson University. So we have a large amount of students who are working with us, excellent students from different parts of the world. And I think I saw one of the students here in our in attendance. So, but anyhow, so one of the research projects I wanted to share with you, just to let you know what we're working on, is with broilers. And our objective here is to study the influence of replacing corn with U.S. sorghum with or without superdoses of phytase to see how it affects broiler productive performance. So we have a good amount of birds here. We have 708 males. We did a couple different treatments. We have one where the diet was based on corn and a typical phytase dosage. Number 2 was a feed based on US number 2 sorghum and a typical phytase dosage, which is recommended by the manufacturer. And then number 3 with the same thing, sorghum US number 2 plus a super dosage of phytase. And we used a feeding program where we had a starter, we had a grow out, and then a finish formulation, which is pretty typical for broiler production. So I wanted to show you here just a sample of the composition of the nutrients. So in this case, the ingredients that were used, here you're able to see that we used sorghum US #2. We had soy meal, which is our source of amino acids, our #1 source. And you can compare what we're seeing between corn and sorghum. And so we're going to have a small reduction in the content of soy in the diet. It might be a 1 to 4%, but there might be some changes, some adjustments. Another change that we're also going to see is that we're going to have an increase in the use of oils or fats in the diet. And we might have an increase on occasion with the use of synthetic amino acids like lysine and methionine and threonine. So those are just dynamic things that we're going to be observing, different changes when we are comparing and making adjustments between sorghum and soy in the diet. So I just wanted to show you what that looked like. And then at the end, of course, we have the nutritional composition of this feed as it's calculated very quickly. And you can also see that we try to keep all of these different feed formulations with the same amount of energy in all the different phases. And one thing I wanted to add, I know a lot of people are wondering if we considered that, you know, have we done different research projects, is the content of fats and lipids in the diet is so important, because a lot of times we're going to see that when we use sorghum, we'll have more starch and we'll have more oils. However, the efficiency, to keep the efficiency of growth of your animals, I've learned that it's really important to maintain that level of raw oils or crude fat in the diet. So we'll see that there are oils or fats, but we do keep that really well level, so that we have that percentage of crude fat in the diet. So it's very important as formulators, as nutritionists, to keep that in mind as well. As far as the results, here we can see the weight. And as you can see, there were no significant differences noted in body weight. So more or less between week 14 and 21, we saw the trend there. So we saw a certain trend in seeing that the animals that were fed with sorghum and the super doses of phytase had a higher weight. However, after those weeks, that disappeared and there were really no more significant differences. So basically, they had a very similar weight. So when we talk about the profits, or excuse me, the weight gain and feed conversion rate, we're able to see that trend and certain differences as far as the up to the 4th week, where the birds fed with a super dose of phytase had better conversion. However, after that, we really didn't have any difference. So in conclusion, when we use sorghum or we use corn, in the way that we formulate it, if we're doing it appropriately, we will have a very similar performance. So this study there was a part 1 and a part 2. Part 1 was obviously with the pullets, and then we moved on to the layers. So the objective here was basically to study the influence of a partial corn replacement. In this case, there was just a certain percentage, 50%, that was replaced. It was a partial replacement of corn with US sorghum, and we wanted to see how the birds grew and developed during this time. So we used the highline brown birds, and here was the treatment we had based on sorghum. And in this case, the second treatment was corn and US number 2 sorghum, and the second was corn and high protein sorghum. It's also US and also free of tannins, but it does have a higher protein content. So that's what we tested in that case. And so the feeding program, we started it during the pullet stage. And so we had a start 1 and 2, grow out, prelay, and then we also monitored their daily feed intake, body weight, daily weight gain, and uniformity.
So here I wanted to show you, this is basically the grow out diet for layers. And this here we have details of we have details here in the end of all the diets, but I'm just showing you the grow out so you can see what it looked like. And here we can see that we used the diet that was only soybean meal and then sorghum. You can see the sorghum and corn we was 1-to-1, and then we have soy, and then we use vegetable oil. And I wanted you to see in yellow how the inclusion of synthetic lysine, methionine, and other synthetic amino acids. You can see that I use some synthetic amino acids. This is for research. We wanted to create the um, a feeding plan that was most common for each one of the birds type in their stages. And so it might not be practicable for you to use so much synthetic amino acids. And so you can see how you can increase the crude protein inclusion in the diet. And you can see how we played with those different inclusion rates. Here, we have the nutrient content, and you can look at this in more detail later, but just very quickly, we wanted to have a nutrition plan that was the most balanced with nutrition, crude protein, and amino acids. Regarding our results, as you can see, you can observe differences. You can see no significant body weight differences after 5 weeks of age. And the reasons that we saw the differences in weeks 1 and 3 was due to an error in the metabolizable energy value assigned for sorghum number 2. So we corrected that, and we used 3,700 kilocalories of metal ME for DM, and we didn't see any differences in those treatments. And so this was an error in our calculations, but then it was corrected. But from there forward, you can see that the growth rates were the same or very similar. So now moving to our next area, we saw the same tendencies. We didn't see significant weight gain. And after 5 weeks of age, and like I said, we had to correct our ME value assigned. And we didn't see differences. I already mentioned that. Oh, let's see. Well, we didn't see any daily intake change after 5 weeks. The other differences, I explained why we had those, and we didn't see any differences between treatments in flock uniformity, which we measured at week 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14, and we didn't see any significant differences in flock uniformities. So we can see that we can formulate appropriately with sorghum and have an appropriate development, a similar development in replacing it one-to-one with corn. This is the continuation of the study. This is when they're in their layer periods, when they're more developed. But here the objective was to determine the influence of these diets in the production and the health of these animals and the quality of the eggs production. And you can see the same diets here. We had the feeding plan where we had the pre-laying peak and then the laying peak, and that you can see that this was that we have the same goals: the feed intake, feed conversion, egg production, external and internal egg quality, protein content, antioxidant capacity in the blood, and the tibiotarsal health. And what we found is that the birds fed with the US sorghum and corn one-to-one from 17 to 40 weeks, they had a production performance similar to the birds fed with corn-based diets. And here we're talking about egg production, feed conversion, and feed intake. And in addition to that, those who were fed with sorghum had a better internal egg quality. We're talking about white weight and how units, and they also had a higher protein and content in the blood, and also antioxidant content in the blood. And they also had an improved tibiotarsal health. Those birds who had been fed with a sorghum-based diet. So they had, we don't have an explanation for that. However, we're going to do research in August specifically to answer that question to see if we can replicate this experiment once again in our new research. And finally, the last study that I wanted to present to you, I'm checking my time, I'm doing good. The objective of this study was to study the efficacy or the efficiency of US sorghum in controlling necrotic enteritis in broilers. You might ask yourself what's the relationship between the two? As I mentioned, sorghum is rich in certain compounds that could for example, antioxidant factors and also certain properties that control the development of certain microorganisms in the intestinal tract. And so we did this study to see if we can see the difference in basically what we did. We had the males that were Cobb 500, and maybe I'll show you on the next slide. So we had a starter, grow out, and finish diet. And here I'm going to show you, these were the 4 treatments that we had. We had one that was just corn and soybean meal. That's a typical starter diet. And then we had another diet that was with red sorghum and soy. And the other ingredients were the same. Another treatment that we had, this was white tan. This is the lighter colored sorghum and with soy. And the last treatment was typical US number 2 sorghum. And of course, for the protein source, we paired it with soybean meal. And so this is the nutritional breakdown of, oh, I didn't show you that slide. Oh, there we go. These are the treatments that I was talking about: corn, soy, red sorghum and soy, and white sorghum and soy, and US number two here with soy. And so these are the typical diets. And then you can see this is for starters, and this is the nutritional composition uh, at a calculated level. And here we can see the results. We have the animals that were fed on these diets, but that weren't challenged because we had some animals that were challenged with the maximum media uh, with the organism that produces necrotic enteritis. And we see those who weren't challenged with those pathogens, they didn't show any lesions in their intestines. That's exactly what we expected. Now, the animals that were fed with these different treatments, plus they were challenged with the maximum pathogen, we can see the differences. All of the animals that were fed with some diet that contains sorghum had fewer lesions or fewer serious lesions than the animals that were fed on the corn-based diet. And so we can see that definitely this was an important point, and we're going to be following up on these findings, and we're going to be doing some additional research to see if we can replicate this using other sorghum treatments and another study using US number two, which is the typical export sorghum, and to see if we can replicate this. And so we'll keep you informed of the results. And this was a study that we did in Kenya a few years ago. And this was really important regarding, I can't give you specific information regarding, because it was a private company that did this and it's a confidential information, but I can give you a summary of both. And here we have one, a study with broilers, another with pullets and layers, and we can see differences in two groups. The group fed with corn-based diets and the group fed with sorghum-based diets. And we can see different representative groups, and we could do a statistical analysis in these cases. And this is where we found no significant difference in weight gain, in body weight, or a feed conversion or mortality in any of these treatments. So the production was similar. And also with pullets and layers, we had a corn-based diet, we had a white corn-based diet and sorghum, and this was 1-to-1 with the treatments. We didn't see significant differences with body weight at the end of the uh, uh, the laying or on any of the laying phases. And so or an egg production or an egg weight. So we can see that if we have appropriate nutrition, we can replace and include sorghum. So upcoming research that we're doing is that we have some amino acid digestibility coefficients that we're studying in sorghum and for broilers, and the efficiency of high metabolite US sorghum hybrids for controlling necrotic enteritis. So with this, we will conclude, and I have my contact information if anyone needs more details regarding this and this information. And that would be it. Is there any question? Thank you, Mire. I really liked your presentation. I congratulate you on that, and it was very clear and to the point, and I really appreciate that.
There are several questions. As a matter of fact, a lot of exchange of information between different attendees. And so, can you stop sharing your screen? Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you so much. Before we go on to the questions, I would like to make a comment. In Mexico, the use of sorghum with animal nutrition in animal feed, it's fairly established for quite a while, and we really thank you for all of the academic information as well. But I would also like to invite Carlos Coelho to give a quick comment regarding the commercial use in feed formulations for poultry. So, Carlos, I don't know if you can share a little bit about what you've heard and what you've seen directly on farms where you are a consultant. Yes, thank you very much, Alberto, and also for the presentations as well. I've always thought that, something very concrete and basic, but we've got two separate groups that are very clearly defined. Some of us who are convinced and some who are not so convinced. So the ones who are free, so we have free of tannins and with tannins. If there's no tannins, it's appropriate if you give it the appropriate values of the nutrient. And that's something that's relatively simple to do. The issue is when there are concentrated tannins, or if you have a laboratory analysis, that information is not going to be good for them because it's not available. And so, what are we going to do? Are we going to work with values that are unknown? Which amount of tannins it contains? So that would be really difficult. And so in Mexico, we're talking about perhaps about 44 years that we've continually and constantly been using different sorghums. And so in the very beginning, in the United States, part of it comes from the United States, part comes directly from Mexico and the northern part of the country, and later the central part of the country. So when I say that we have a lot of experience, the biggest egg laying company has 43 million laying chickens. And so they are producing more eggs in Latin America, and they're using sorghum. Not always. It's going to depend on price. However, we're not so worried about sorghum about the tannins, that is, because the tannins are directly related to a genetic factor. So if it has pigmented, it's going to have the content, and we have to quantify how much it is. If it doesn't have a pigmented there's no condensed tannins. And so that's where we have some words that cause a lot of confusion. White sorghum, brown sorghum, sweet sorghum, bitter sorghum. And I think that we should really focus on the essence of whether it's sorghum with tannins or without. Or in other words, is it brown or is it colorless? And that would let us to all talk about the same thing and be on the same page. And so the good thing is, and I don't see an alternative, because when we talk about 12 million tons, I mean, as an option, that's an impressive number. And Mexico is the first and second importer of sorghum from the United States for many years now. And the largest amount goes directly to uh, uh, agriculture and mainly to poultry. And so when we talk about including it into so poultry are animals that we would say in Mexico that eat too much. That's how we say. We say they eat too much. They just won't be satisfied. And so as far as having condensed tannins, the chickens, they're going to consume the food. The problem is the food conversion rate. And why we say it's an over conversion? Because the tannins are causing a deficiency in the usage and absorption of nutrients. And so with hens, we see that mostly because a hen has specific space for their area. And the problem is that it's making sure it eats. And so those, even though both are birds, one eats a lot and the other one doesn't want to eat enough. So on the other hand, broilers is going to deposit the nutrients in its body, and it's very difficult for it to eliminate. However, a hen, every time it's laying an egg, it's going to be depositing some of those nutrients there. So the effects of tannins in a hen are going to be more readily manifested, whereas a broiler is going to have a decreased growth rate. But if we, look at that after weeks, we'll finally realize that. But however, with a hen, at the moment that it's excreting, because it does that also through the egg, and excreting those nutrients, we'll be able to see those differences very quickly. And all of these additives are going to help. However, it's the carbohydrate structure in sorghum is not the same as corn. We can't expect the same response. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but rather they're going to have different responses. And so we have to work with that. And additionally, just to conclude my final statement, we have a lot of experience in Mexico because without having any issues at all, we're able to completely replace corn with sorghum. So what's the difference? Well, basically, price. When the price is favorable, we use sorghum. If we need to more advice in formulations and nutrition, and as you can see, just like it was already mentioned, we have to do our formulations. I think everyone is doing that by looking at digestible amino acids. So if people are doing formulations without any foundation, of course, they're going to make really big mistakes. And that's going to be directly noticed in production. And it's not a computer mistake. Those are just the interactions that we see between nutrients. And so we purchase ingredients. And so what we need are nutrients. Therefore, the more aware we are of the nutrients that are provided in the diet, then we'll have the appropriate response. So that's just my comments, Alberto. Thank you very much, Carlos. I'm going to also take advantage of this moment before we move on to the question and answer phase of this session, and what we're seeing in the chat as well. I would like to also mention to all of you that there is going to be, at the end of this webinar, they're going to share a link with all of you in the chat, and you can fill that out. And if you fill out that survey or that link as soon as possible, you'll receive a certificate of participation. So if you had any issues to fill out your certificate, I just shared the email address for our digital manager from the Soy Excellence Center for Americas. It's americas@soyexcellence.org. And there you can request any assistance in getting the information. So you can fill that out, and then you can also receive your certificate of participation. So we received several comments and a few questions. Some people answered each other's questions within the chat as well, but we're going to get started with that. So let's see. I am not sure if I pronounced that name. Tosin Oloniju said in Nigeria, they are utilizing a high tannin variety of the red sorghum. However, it's mainly used for as a feedstock for humans, for human consumption. And that's the reason why the concentration of production is generally for domestic use. However, the question was also made, what is the US doing as far as working with exchange of technology to create more knowledge and awareness about hybrid crops with zero tannins on a worldwide level, and more specifically for the sub-Saharan African continent area. So are you able to answer that, Florentino? Yes, one of the comments I would make about that is that most of the sorghum, the seed, is always produced here in Texas. About 70% of the worldwide seed comes from this area. There are tannins, seeds with tannins that are being produced in other areas. One very famous country for that is Argentina, and most of that is for poultry. So the amount of birds that are in that area, that's just one way of avoiding having the birds eat the sorghum. So there are amounts that can be shared with other countries as far as information about seeds. It is available. The companies that are here in the United States are sending them to other areas. The seeds are being used in Bolivia. They're being grown in Mexico. Most of the seed in Mexico comes from here in the United States, a large amount of it, and likewise in Europe. So the seeds are available. It's always just a matter of looking at what need there is, what variety is there, what type can be produced as efficiently as possible in your area. So that's what we've noticed in previous years. There is seed available, and we can also move the technology. It's just a matter that what happened here is in 1970s is that the companies decided to not include tannins, not have tannins. And that's something that all the companies got together and they came to an agreement, or they came to a point where they basically got rid of all of the lines that had tannins. I mean, you can find some, just like Dr. Arguello said, there is sorghum. I mean, even in different colors, white, black, and there's a very high amount of tannins. However, most of that sorghum is used for human consumption. So whenever we see amounts like that. Okay, thank you very much, Florentino. Before we go back to Carlos Lopez Cuello, I'm going to just ask another question here. So Florentino, if you can keep your camera on, this question is for you. Alan asked, what is the maximum amount of tannins in the tannin, and in what values, or how is that expressed numerically? So we noticed there within the comments, there's a value that the University Texas A&M does the testing for the U.S. Grains Council, and they have more information about ways to do that. But you can find that in the report, within the grain report at grains.org. You can find that report specifically about how the tannins are being found. There are different ways, but we're trying to utilize one specifically, which is being tested at Texas A&M. Thank you. Thank you, Florentino. Okay, Carlos, you were asking to make a comment? Yeah, it's just something very brief. Sorghum for human consumption goes through a treatment, through a process. It could be heating it or cooking it, but it's not consumed raw. And that makes a really big difference, and it's very important, and it affects digestibility of the carbohydrates, amino acids, because they are different carbohydrates from sorghum than from corn. Or excuse me, yes. However, sorghum with poultry, it goes through grinding. That's it. And so that's just my point. So that's why humans are looking for highest amount of tannins, because these processes, one way or the other, are reducing the anti-nutritional factors. And also, we also are not trying to get humans to lay a bunch of eggs or gain a bunch of weight. So at the end of the day, a chicken that is consuming tannins eventually, like once a week, is going to decrease their growth rate, because it's going to not necessarily manifest as a problem, but we're going to be seeing that constantly. Okay, thank you, Carlos. Okay, so Alan has a question. You can go ahead and turn your camera on and unmute. Go ahead, Alan. Hello, yes. So hello to everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you in this webinar. I wanted to make a comment. And so I had asked a question at the very beginning, like what are the levels of tannins and the urease? And so my question is, for many years, I had the opportunity of doing tannin analysis, but it turns out that that was a disqualifying factor. And so what they gave me some trials where they had a tannin that tended to be white, or it tended to be like less white, the other was more brown. And so those results would show these are higher, medium, or low. So now with this conversation, with this session, and with Mirele, I was like, well, that's cool. I mean, now for so many years we were seeing that. And so now I'm realizing that there is an actual method, and it seems like there's an instrument that can be used, and you can measure, from what I understood from Dr. Mireille, is that it's determining the butanoic acid, and that's what you're measuring. And that's, so in other words, that's my comment there is, in Colombia, it had us, we were measuring tannins, but it was very qualitative. However, this is more of a quantitative method, which is going to be more expensive, yes, but that's really, really good information, because now when we take it to a laboratory, we can find out what that technique is, and that way we would be able to have an actual quantitative value and to see what those levels are. So that's what I wanted to mention, is I had done that testing before, but it was as a qualitative, not as quantitative. And that's what we're able to do now. And it seems to me that that would be an instrument that can be used. I think it's like, maybe it's in infrared spectroscopy, something of that level, from what I've understood today. And so, and learning about sorghum. And so it's very interesting that that could replace corn, replace it with sorghum. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alan.
Mire, do you want to answer the question? Yes. What we've seen both. We've worked with Miami University, and we've worked with the people from Iowa, and they use different methodologies. In fact, Dr. Hagerman from Miami University was the one who recommended that I use Iowa if I wanted a more quantitative analysis. So we moved to that one, and we're really happy with that. And it's not very costly. We're really surprised because the one from Miami University is more expensive than the Iowa one, and it's quantitative because there's a specific number of tannins that it measures if there are tannins present in the sample. If you want information for the people in Iowa, let me know and I can get you that information. Thank you, Mire. Carlos, you have, well, what we have to analyze are the compensated tannins. And in the case in Colombia, they were using the vanillin test. If the different techniques and analysis aren't compatible and can't be compared. So, well, you could say that they're not comparative. But if you have a variety, and if you do a very simple condensed test on the tannins, and if you find grains that there's no pigment in the shell, then that would be something that I would mention, that there's no tannin in it. Thank you, Carlos. I think Florentino, I think this is questions for you from Samuel Maya. And then there's another one, I believe, for Mirel. Samuel Maya asks, How demanding is the sorghum crop? Because we have different types of soil. Could be, I see that you have high plains, low plains, coastal, mountain valleys. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we've noted different hybrids or varieties are grown, or production is better in different areas. The time when they are budding, and time to harvest, the variety that you're going to be using and so in southern Texas, it's completely different from South Dakota's variety. And so we're looking at different varieties. All of these companies, these companies are looking at what genetics work best in what area when we compare one to another. So those tests are done all the time. Last week, or the week before, there were several companies that were checking their crops to see which crosses or hybrids were moving forward for next year. They're always looking for genetics that can be improved for one area or another. That within those genetics, also, we're trying to see how we can do the best for the environment, the amount of water that it requires. The insects in a certain area is different than another area. That is really important for us to know what kind of sorghum can be produced in one area or another. I hope hopefully I can get information. That information is helpful for you. Thank you, Florentino. We're going to have follow-up information for you and future information for you. Samuel Maya also asked, I think for Carlos or Mirel, he says, are there bromatological sorghum types or hybrids uh, in that have comparable nutritional levels as the US sorghum? Well, right now we're working with testing to see what uh, how sorghum planted in different areas in the southwest of the US. And that I know that's really specific, but that's what we're looking at right now. The nutritional value and the amino acid digestibility. Right now, I don't know if we have information available how to compare US sorghum versus uh, tannin-free sorghum that's cultivated in areas outside of the US and the Americas. And I don't know if Carlos can go into details regarding that. Carlos, do you have a comment regarding that? Yes, we've worked with this, coordinating with grains buyers and or the users and the farmer, and we're talking about uh, those who are producing 1.5 million uh, chickens a day, and they uh, want to make sure that their feed is very nutritional, and of course the poultry producer wants to buy nutrients and the farmer wants to sell weight. And so this can be affected by genetics and also by agronomics and crop conditions. When we use nutritional and isocaloric formulations, we don't see much difference. But when we formulate pound by pound one ingredient over another, one grain, we see the difference. But if we can have the farmer see the value added va portion of its product and of the crop that they're producing, and also the nutrient level in that is really important. And but in all this process, we have traceability as an issue as well. Well, we might be able to know what sorghum comes from what area of the US. Traceability is almost impossible. Thank you, Carlos. Well, Alan Florentino added in the chat a link for information for the US Grains Council, which that you were asking about for measuring tannins. My friend Gerardo Luna asked a question that was important, but I'll ask it again just for everyone's information. He asks, Gerardo does, is there information regarding sorghum inclusion in pet diets? What are the benefits or advantages of that inclusions? And is there financial, commercial, or premium or clinical diets that are important? Florentino, if there's information where there's more precise information regarding pet food. I don't want to go into much detail with this because this audience is mostly for poultry, and so we can include that information. Of of course, we see that it is evidently used in pet diets. So there's a long comment from Tosin Olenijolu regarding Africa and sorghum availability when compared to corn. We see that everywhere. And the corn grains, when they're on the cob, there's they have the covering to protect it on the ears from pests, especially birds. And sorghum already has that protection. During sorghum production, especially in the grain fill out stage, it's susceptible to, in Africa especially, for those kind of pests when this crop isn't covered with some kind of screening or mesh. And so those red tannins, which the cultivars which are used there, does that have something to do with it? Well, like I also already mentioned for a chicken or a hen, but when we're talking about a bird, what kind of bird, what conditions are they migrating? Um, are they hungry? We need to be careful with that because a in a broiler that would reduce the nutritional value and the digestibility, but a layer has to recover when nutrition, all of that nutrition that is being lost in laying 60 eggs over their lifetime. And well, that birds that we're talking about in Africa, are they laying eggs or not? There are a lot of factors. So I think that's one reason why he's saying that they have the content of tannin in the red sorghum that they use there in Africa. Well, also because many of it is for human consumption. Mario Garcia asks if is use for whole sorghum, and Brent Crafton said that there's information regarding that. Brent, would you like to comment regarding that? Would you like to comment about what you answered Mario in the chat?
Brent, if you would like to give your response on the air. And if you have not selected Spanish, go ahead, Brent, go ahead.
Yes, during 2023, the Sorghum Checkoff conducted a broiler nutrition project in the country of Norway with a cooperating feed mill and 3 integrated broiler producers. They opted to formulate with whole grain sorghum with great success. If you'd like that information, we can certainly share the results of that, as well as a short webinar where the cooperating feed mill, the poultry nutritionists from that feed mill shared their thoughts, their insights, as well as their guidance and their experiences. My email address is in the chat, and if you would send me an email, I can certainly help pass that along as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Brent. It is much appreciated. So Tosin Onluyu is very busy in the chat. We really appreciate all of your comments and participation so actively in the chat. And the question is, have we considered reducing costs of processing by using probiotics? I don't know exactly who this question would be for, if it's for Carlos or if it's for Mireille. If you have information. Yes, go ahead, Carlos. Yes, obviously, most of the information is available because it's so much consumption. And it was already mentioned that phytase acts very well. And I'm also convinced that because of the fruit and also the tannins, there's kind of like a Bermuda Triangle we're dealing with here. If you have condensed tannins and it's very well sealed, there's not a whole lot you can do with that. Phytates are controlled, and I think there's a lot to work on regarding enzymes and with sorghum, because we are just transferring information from corn to sorghum. But when we took a look at the difference in the market that we see between the use of corn and the use of sorghum, well, then the research is going to go in that direction. So the U.S. Grains Council has information and very important contributions regarding this. And I think that would be the organization that has the most amount of information about sorghum. And so this also, we have to also appreciate and thank them for that. Thank you. So there are several other questions. This one really caught my attention. Corina Dominguez asked, the percentage of tannins in sorghum, what does that depend on? So why, like we can talk about varieties that are free from tannins and others will always have tannins. I believe you talked about that a bit ago, Carlos. Can you talk more about it? Generally, I don't know, because I'm not really involved in agronomy, but one same variety that's going to be grown in 2022 and the same variety in a different location in 2023, it's going to have different tannin values. So I think that It's not specifically related to the genetics of the seed, but also the crop conditions as well, and stress conditions as well. Okay, I agree with your response too, that it is also a genetic response. Yes, but the actual concentration of tannins will vary. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answer. Mireille Tosin Olenoyu, do you also agree with that idea that tannins can also help with the coccidosis within the intestine? It seems interesting that there was that comment about that. Would you like Mireille to talk more about that? Yes. Oh, so sorry. No, go ahead. Go ahead. I just wanted to make a comment that it might make a small amount of condensed tannins is possible. It's not impossible, but they're very, very low levels. And so in the case of what we've researched, there are other types of phenolic compounds, not necessarily talking really about tannins, because it's such a low concentration of tannins that we don't believe it would have a significant impact. We're really concentrating more on other types of polyphenolic compounds, but they are not condensed tannins, just to clarify that. Carlos, you wanted to make another comment? Yes, yes. Please don't turn off your camera. Stay with us. So if we're talking about infections and we're talking about coccidosis, that's also infectious disease, but there's also a immune response. And so the coccidosis, because of the life cycle of the parasite, it's going to cause enteritis. And if we're talking about enteritis, it's going to have a bigger vulnerability, and there's direct damage to the birds as well. So it really depends a lot on what we're looking for, what we're trying to do. If we're trying to control coccidosis, we need to use like an actual medication for that, whether it's either it's biological control or a chemical control, because it's going to go and affect the life cycle of that parasite. However, if we're trying to reestablish the intestinal integrity of the bird, that's where we talk about other protocols. And there's other, one would be if we want to work on the reestablishment of the microbiota of the, that's also important. And also, we're talking about the general health more so than a probiotic. So there's a lot of different areas that we can really approach this from, but coccidosis as it is, I would say using a medication against coccidosis would be very important, because, we've been doing this for more than 40 years and we're not seeing a really great option. And and a lot of countries don't want the use of antibiotics. And so we have to find other methods of control. Okay, thank you, Carlos. I think in this case, they were really referring to the study that Mireille had talked about regarding having a lower incidence of lesions, intestinal lesions in the intestine, as when they compared it to the use of corn as compared to using sorghum, showing that there were fewer lesions in the birds that were fed with sorghum, and not as, for example, a solution to the issue of coccidosis, but rather just as a point of comparison. Yes, of course. Very great work that was done. Yes, I really liked it very much. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that I can't pronounce your full name. I'm just going to refer to you by your first name, Tosin. I'm apologizing in advance. The other question was, are there any fast tests like are done like when you have to measure glucose to be able to measure tannins in the different varieties of sorghum? Is there any kind of a fast test or a rapid test analysis that can be used for that purpose, Mireille? Well, in our case, I am not aware of any. Obviously, we always have to try to publish all of our results and everything we're researching. We always have to take it to the laboratory to make sure we're getting some exact levels to know what the exact content of all the different compounds that we're studying. So we always go to the laboratory. I'm not aware if maybe Carlos would like to share information about any kind of fast test that might exist. Carlos? Yes, but as far as to have the concentration, like Mirele said, but the test of bleaching is very important to know if it does or doesn't have tannins. So if that testa is brown or is no color, then there's no tannins. If it's white or very light colored, well, I mean, with white, it could, also just making sure that there are none. It's either a yes or a no, though, that type of analysis, but it doesn't give you the concentration or levels. Okay, thank you. Stephen Barba is asking directly, Carlos, if you could emphasize the advantage of physiological and intestinal health, which is an effect of the saturation of agents, like in the case of tannins. It's not that. So Mirele explained very well, and I think you also re-emphasized it again. There's two different situations. One part of it is all birds, all poultry is going to have coccidia. We're wanting for it to not become an issue and to become coccidosis. So we're trying to keep any infection level to be low so it can be kept under control. And that's known as coccidiasis. But either way, within the life cycle of all of these birds, there is a certain part of their unicellular life, the parasite. And so that's where it's able to penetrate the intestine and cause damage. That intestinal damage can open the door to other microorganisms, which obviously are present within the intestine as it is. And so that would be the big issue. So all of the birds are going to have coccidiasis at one level or another, but we're talking about an inflammatory response. And this is going to cause greater permeability, which is what allows the microorganisms to be able to populate the intestine. So it's really just an opening. It just provides an opening. So having a flock with zero coccidia that's practically impossible. And so having poultry completely free of pathogens is basically impossible. Thank you. I don't know, maybe they could be in beds for months without access, and we still see that they have coccidosis. Okay. So we're about to go over time. In fact, we have gone over almost half an hour over. However, I'm just going to make some brief comments before we close. I'm now being asked for us to hurry up and close up. There are so many questions, so many comments. Give me just a moment. Let me just take a look.
Wilson unfortunately had network issues, has been on and off. Tosin, I hope that you're hearing the interpretation. We're going to have the recording available for you. Also, together with your attendance, your certificate of completion or attendance, and we'll have a link with that to the video recording. And if Florentino and Mireille allow us to share the presentations, I don't think we discussed this before the presentation, before the webinar. If they allow us to share the presentation, then we can have a place where you can download the PDF version of these presentations. The person that is managing all of the digital platform for the Soy Excellence Center can be contacted at America's at soyexcellence.org. Oh, I'm entering it in the chat now, so you can see it there. Soy Excellence. soyexcellence.org, and you can have that information. Moises, we're a little over time. Are there any comments or questions regarding this topic? Claudio, I believe you have a comment. You can activate your microphone. Thank you, Alberto. Don't leave yet. We're going to be sending you the attendance form. Claudio's going to be sending that right now. Moises, are you there? I'm not sure if you have any comment regarding this. I believe not. Well, there are several comments and emails that have been shared. Alan mentioned the bleaching process that's done with sodium hypochlorite, and Eduardo Luna said that sorghum's sustainability from the US is and their efforts are made by producers in the US to ensure that sorghum and soy is sustainable, and maybe that is something also available from the U.S. Grains Council. What can you mention regarding the issue of sustainability for the sorghum checkoff program? Efforts have begun and working directly with the Grains Council, and that's a program that you'll be seeing in the future. And it's in the planning process right now, and we're close to launch a big effort in that area. On our website, you can see information regarding that effort, but there will be a bigger component for exporting, and we hope to see that launched very soon. Elizabeth, please, if you need to leave, I believe if you need to leave, please go ahead. I can close our session. So Cecilia Castillo asked also, commented, Mirel, regarding your presentation. You mentioned that for pelleted products for poultry, we should use low temperatures. What about for pets where the temperatures are higher? Well, I'm not an expert on pet food, so I would hesitate to mention much on that. But I think I'm estimating regarding that, you need to be very careful about that. And I think the processing will be more aggressive on that point. But I don't have much to comment about that because, again, I'm not a pet food specialist. Thank you, Mire. I'm going a little crazy with all these questions. I'm sorry about that. I didn't read it too well before just asking it to you on live. Well, there are several additional comments, and Gerardo says that we're always fighting time in these kinds of meetings. And Gerardo congratulates all of you. This was a wonderful presentations and at the participation. I really enjoyed yours, Miriam. And one thing that I wanted to emphasize, please everyone go to the chat, and there's a message from Claudio Gonzalez, and he's our digital manager, and you'll see for our Soybean Excellence Center, there's a link for a Google form where your attendance can be verified and you can receive your certificate of completion, and also you can stay in contact with the Soy Excellence Center. Well, I believe that's all the information. Florentino, would you please put a link in the chat regarding sorghum sustainability? I don't believe that we have any more to cover. And I think with that, we can finish. I'd like to hear a final comment from each one of you. Carlos, we'll start with you. First, your closing comments for our session. Well, we need to really appreciate this information we've received, because if it weren't for this type of meeting, maybe you wouldn't have much knowledge of sorghum. And we have resources and time invested, and the goal is for us to be aware of both products and make our formulation decisions. And I'd like to thank Mireille and Florentino and Alberto for moderating. And there's a lot of work behind these presentations. And so thank you very much. Thank you. Before passing the mic, I'd like to ask Shelley from Sorghum Checkoff if she has any final comments before we close.
Thank you, Alberto. Yes, we appreciate your time, and we appreciate you joining us tonight. As Brent Crafton mentioned, any additional questions can be directed to Brent C at sorghumcheckoff.com, and he can also drop that into the chat as well. But we welcome any additional questions as it relates to sorghum and soy in the formulations.
Thank you very much, Shelley, and I appreciate your comment. Well, Tosin also wanted to talk about nitrogen reduction in the environment, but that was mentioned also. And Florentino, I'd like to hear your final comments. The same as Shelley, it's just great to have the opportunity to speak more regarding the subject of sorghum. For me, it's really important to see the desire of people who are here to want to learn more, to listen, and learn something new. It's great that we have Dr. Argüelles and Dr. Lopez with us to share information, and that will be of help in the future. And it's something that I'm always looking at. Our part is always trying to enhance our human population and be a benefit of humanity to do the best for our world and for our people. And thank you very much for having me again. Thank you, Florentino, for the presentation. Mirel? would you like to make a final comment for this webinar? I really appreciate your presentation, and please give us some closing comments.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm really thankful for this invitation to be here. It's a pleasure to talk about the work we've done here at the university so far. And I also would like to congratulate all of the participants here. It's never too late to learn. I'm an educator, and so I always love educating. And so I really congratulate you for being here in the evening and taking away time from your family and etc. to be able to continue your professional development. So excellent. I think it's wonderful, and I think this type of forum is really wonderful. And as I mentioned before, Sorghum, Soy are excellent. They team well together. What else can I say? You've got lots of great information. You have information from Sorghum Chekhov and from Dr. Carlos Lopez and also from Florentino. And likewise, it'd be a pleasure for me to also allow you to have access to my presentation. And you'll also have information to contact me if you would like additional information about that as well. Thank you so much, Mirel. And so now we will conclude our session this evening. Well, that concludes the webinar, and thank you so much on behalf of the soy growers in the United States. It's through its arm of sharing academic information with the U.S. For the Soy Excellence Center. I thank you so much. I'm sorry that we went over time more than we had contemplated. This was our first webinar altogether, a joint webinar. And so we'll be scheduling others later on. So we'll see you next time. Take care. And we hope you have a great evening. And we have a habit as well with SEC. We ask everyone to turn on their camera so we can all say goodbye to each other. So that way we can put a face to names. So then we'll say goodbye, seeing each other. So thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you so much. A special comment to the interpreters. Thank you, Chris and Amy. Thank you for all of your support with the translation as well. It was great. Thank you. Okay. We'll be in contact. Thank you, Brent. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.